Hi, everybody. This is Steve Hogger, the pastor of Hickory Hill Baptist Church. Today is Wednesday in the Word, and today is the last day of March, Wednesday, March the 31st. And we're continuing through the Sermon on the Mount. So we're in Matthew chapter 6. Now I'm going to back up a little bit so we can kind of trace our steps to understand what he's talking about today, because it all builds upon each other. So we're in Matthew chapter 6. To go back, we looked at last week. And verse 19 says, "Do not store up yourselves treasures on earth, where the moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal." Now we understand that. He says, guys, don't store up on stuff on earth where it's going to be destroyed or taken, where the moth will come eat your clothes, the rust will come rust up your vehicle, or where thieves will come in and steal what you got. In verse 20 it says, "But store for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal." So he says, guys, don't store up on earth, but go and store up in heaven, where those things can't be touched, where the moth and the rust and the thieves can't come and steal. And then he goes, "For where your treasure is, there will be your heart also." And he says, guys, where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. Many times we think, okay, well, I'm a good guy. I go to church, but look at your treasures. Look at the things that you focus in on. You may say your heart is over here, but you know what? Jesus is very clear. He says, guys, where your treasure is, that will be where your heart is. Then he goes on in verse 22. He kind of explains a little further. He says, "The eye is a lamp of the body. If your eyes are good," now the word "good" there can be translated clear or single. So the eye is a lamp of the body. What he means there, he says, guys, your eyes shows what your heart is about, basically. Your eyes are kind of like the window into your heart. Best way of putting it. And if your eyes are good, if your eyes are single, if they are clear, your whole body will be full of light. In other words, if your eyes are right, your heart's right. You got a single devotion. Your heart is pure. It is clear. He says, but if your eyes are bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. In other words, your eyes illustrate what your heart is. And if your eyes are bad, it illustrates your heart is bad. And if your heart is bad, you'll be full of darkness. And if the light is within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? In other words, if your eyes are not clear, if they're not single devotion, and he said, how great is that darkness? He goes on a little further, explains a little further. In verse 24, he says, "No one can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." So he says, guys, he says, you can't have two masters. You got to have one. You can't have two, because you'll love one, hate the other. Or you'll love this one over here and hate this one. You can't have two. I remember a cowboy saying this one time in a movie I watched, and I am going to not use the colorful language that he used, but he basically said, you can only ride. Your hindy, your rear end can only fit into one saddle. You can't ride two horses. You only fit into one saddle. So that is basically what Jesus is saying. You can only be devoted into one. You can only have one master. And then he goes on and kind of just gives an illustration. He goes, you cannot serve God and money. So you can't have God over here and money over here. You can't serve both of them, because you'll love one and you'll hate the other. Or you'll love this one and you'll hate this one. You can't do it. You can't divide up your loyalty. You can't walk a fence. Eventually it's going to get hurt, because you'll fall and slip. So what Jesus is saying, he says, guys, if your eyes are single, and your eyes are the windows to your heart, if your heart is single devotion, then that single devotion needs to be right. And I'm going to do this. I want to sum up everything he says, okay? And this will make more sense. The very first thing he says that we looked at, he says, store up the right treasures. He says, you got to store them up. Store up the wrong treasures on earth, then the thieves and the rust and the moth will come and get rid of it. And he goes, where that treasure is, there's your heart. And if you store up the right treasures, if you have a single devotion to that treasure, you have single vision, and how great that'll be. How much full of light and how much single devotion you'll have if you have the right treasure. I hope I made sense, and I want to encourage you to think about, who do you serve? You know, in 2 Peter it says, we're a slave to whatever masters us. So what is it that masters you? Let's be honest. You say, well, preacher, I serve God. Well, that's great. Does that say that in your checkbook? Does that say that in your time management? Where your treasure is, there will be your heart. Your single devotion. You can't be devoted to two. You got to be devoted to one. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got something out of this. This Sunday is Easter. Hope you can come and join us. And as we have breakfast at 8, as we hunt Easter eggs, and if we celebrate the resurrection of our Lord. Hey, have a good week. Talk to you later.